Top of the afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do a little taste test comparison. We're going to run this completely bone stock 088 against this Psychowise 661. Now that saw belongs to my BFF, I guess, at this point. And so I had the opportunity to run a pretty decent functioning, operating, running 395 against a bone stock and then a zipped 880 a while ago, a couple winters ago, I guess, at this point. We were running the 42-inch bar. It's an old roller nose. I have some of those hanging around from back in the day. I think that's an old General bar, actually, but I can't really remember for sure. But we're sporting 404 chain, which is the great equalizer for chainsaws anyway. And I don't know much about the 088 except a client bought it and had it sent over, and so we're going to scope it out. We'll take a look under the hood after we do the test run. I took a cut off of that because they have a tendency to get checked and dry out, so we're going to be a little bit more even Steven in this. I don't have any idea how the two are going to compare. I have not run that thing much except a little bit of monkey business here and there since the psychowization process happened. Pretty new, I don't know. The thing has like less than 10 hours on it. This saw obviously has quite a bit of time, but we're kind of warmed up, but it's like at least 80 degrees out here now in the spring. We've kind of warmed up a little bit. I noticed from some of the other saw testings with this particular log, it gets pretty hammered on by the sun. It's actually warmed up quite a bit in the last couple weeks, but the first slice off there is a little bit compromised, if you will. It seems like you get back in there a little bit and actually has a little bit of resistance. So I'm thinking that the second cut with the 088 was a little bit slower as we're getting into a little bit more solid wood, if you will. Now, one thing that I wanted to talk about, I did weigh these after I filled them both up just as a comparison. 16.8 came in on the 661, which generally they're weighing about 19. And that, of course, is on my less than accurate hand-me-down bathroom scales. They are not weights and measures accurate, but they give a relative number. And so I weighed port and starboard. I weighed them both ways, came up even, Steven. Then I weighed the 088, and it came in at 25.8 pounds. And there it was bouncing around. There it is again on the port side. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. I know that the 880 weighs about 26 pounds fully fueled. I checked that out quite a bit when I was running one of those against my 084, and it weighs about 24 pounds fully fueled. So they're quite a bit heavier. The minus 0.2 of a pound here is probably partially because we're missing the swoop-de-doo on this side for the full wrap. I'm generally running wrap version saws, so I guess maybe we can talk a little bit while I bumble through the bar chain. And one thing that I kind of forgot to mention is that chain is pretty much brand new. I think that's only the first time I've ever sharpened that thing, and so it's kind of an interesting concept. As far as how the chains will actually do once you get them sharpened a few times, what I found is it usually takes about 4 or 5 sharpenings, and then they actually really start to cut good. Until that point, you're kind of just struggling. On a personal level, I won't run a chain that comes out of the box or off the roll. They're actually dull. You got to tune the angles up quite a bit. Got to remember they have like 4 machines in a row, and they grind 4 teeth, and then they rotate the chain forward and grind 4 more teeth, and they have opposing heads, if you will, so they're grinding like 8 teeth at a time in their operation. At least what I saw over at Oregon Chain in Milwaukee when I visited that place. I think I saw that the first time. Maybe even looked at it again a little bit the second time. But anyway, kind of digressed. They kind of redesigned some things in the 088 from the 084. The cases have a little bit different shape to them. They're actually probably a little bit better for fuel storage, if you will. I just kind of thought about that. The muffler mounting system on the 088 is painful, I guess. I think there's a bench talk video that shows the handful of parts that you actually need to do that. I was kind of amazed at what that actually takes to get that muffler kind of handled, I guess on a personal level, but I'm a simpleton. I've admitted that many times before in this process, and I guess I don't have a problem admitting it again. I like the KISS method of things, keep it simple, stupid. So I did actually order myself one of these custom bar spacers from Canon that works on the intermediate mount 12 millimeter stud size in most of the pro saws from about 362 to the 660s, 661s all run the 12. And I did modify this bar I had to actually, because it started life as a big mount Stihl bar, and in order to get the thing to oil, you kind of have to take care of the oil hole a little bit in here. So if we want to take a look at what's going on as far as the mount, the big mount Stihl is huge. And that's the small mount, or excuse me, the intermediate mount. But you can see how the oil hole doesn't even come close to lining up elevation wise in the smaller saws versus what you see on like the 084 through 090s are kind of a little bit different situation. At least all the saws from the, you want to talk about the saws from the 80s, although the 090's been around for eons. I don't even remember when they made that saw. Back in the 60s, I think they started with it. And I'm noticing that we have a situation where they drilled the recess for the bolt that holds the guide plate for the chain guide, the inside bar plate essentially, guide combo. They drilled the hole on the wrong side of the operation so that you actually don't get a good fit with this thing. So I'm gonna have to drill that out before we continue. Okay, so we're back on track after quite the little process, and after a phone call to Bill up at Cannon Bar Works in Canada, I found out this bar spacer that I bought for this application actually wasn't designed for this application. They haven't actually had a request. I was kind of looking in their information and saw where it was the spacing wise. I think this is 31 millimeters from center line of the studs, and so I figured that's what this was for. It's really not. It's for like a stinger if you're doing a two-man operation on the end of a long bar or something like that. And so with some drilling and some I don't know, I used a burr in there to kind of get the holes positioned correctly. We now have a bar spacer for the D025 mount that actually works if you want to mate up a big mount Stihl bar to the intermediate size. This is 14, the gap essentially 14 millimeters. If you want to run that on a 12 millimeter saw, I now have a official spacer. So since it wasn't intended for this application, and most of the time people aren't running these long bars that are the old style with the big mount Stihl on the intermediate size, could that be the world's first? I don't even know. Really hard to tell. Last time I checked, the world was a big place. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and work on getting this barred up. As like I said, I kind of bumble along through it, and we're running 404. Again, I think I mentioned that already, but we're running 7-tooth on both of these saws. We're even Steven, at least as far as that goes. And so I thought I would just make mention of it, just in case here. Okay, looks like we got a hold of it. We're going to have to start over because we've run out of adjustment. Back to the drawing board. Now I'm going to have to drill a hole in this bar to get it to mate up properly. I managed to get the bar drilled out so it would accept the relocation of the pin that basically does the chain adjustment on your bar to actually fit in the right place on this saw. I've had this bar on a Husqvarna 395, and so I guess I never really thought that they were that far apart. If I was to be completely honest, I never really thought about it. Amtronic 661, so we don't get to control the carburation whatsoever as far as like adjusting with the needles. We'll warm it up off camera. So I dug down in a pile. That's what the 088 was pulling out of there. And this is what the 661 was pulling out of there. It felt like the stops were pretty close to being just perfect once we got back in there a little bit, actually. What I'm noticing is the further we get back into this log, which it was clear out past the camera when we started this operation, the more solid it's becoming. And so you can see that situation with the knots themselves. They're starting to become more pronounced, and the rot component's getting a lot less. That spike knot is getting more solid. The perimeter of that log is getting more solid. So I guess if we want to take a look at the participants a little bit better, sorry, apologize, but our little rural road seems to be like expressway today. The 088 had a better go of it, in my humble opinion, based on what we're seeing in the log itself. It seemed like it did pretty good for stock. It's definitely well broken in. It's got plenty of compression. If we do the little string check here real quick. So it has a decent amount of compression. completely bone stock down to the limiters in, well, on the needles in the carburetor. So I think if we kind of take a look at the cookies that came off of this, it's a 3-foot bar, won't actually reach through this log anymore, so that's what's going on. We can see there's a lot more rot out in the front, and the knot, they're actually getting a little bit bigger, I think, as we're going back. And so I guess in my humble opinion, what I'm seeing is a lot more knot cross section that the 661 had to deal with. So essentially, if the 661 was anywhere even remotely close to the same as far as the time that it took to get through that cut, or either one actually, that's kind of saying something about the state of tune of the 661. We have 122.6, I think it is, or 0.1, I don't remember. I haven't looked at the situation for a little while here. It says 122. I think I calculated it out, years ago or whatever. I think it's 121.6 technically. It's got a 43 millimeter stroke by a 60 millimeter bore, so it's a little bit longer stroke than what you see in the 3120 by 1 millimeter, because they have the same bore, 60 millimeters. We have a 91 point, I think it's 1.3 or something if you do the math, piston displacement on a 661. They have a 56 millimeter bore and a 37 millimeter stroke. So a much smaller engine, actually doing pretty good. At least that's what I thought with 404 chains. So thanks for watching this session. Have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.